Hello, hello, hello. My name is Daniel, here again with our latest episode of Founders Live with Jennifer Yen from Yensa and Purelease.
Thank
Jennifer,
you.
how are you?
Good. How are you? Thanks for having me here.
Excited to have you. For those that are new to the show, this is our weekly-ish show. We do between 1 to 3 episodes a week, and really would just love to dive into your story, Jennifer, to speak to our audience of founders and entrepreneurs that are watching. So, maybe we can first start with where are you calling in from today?
So I'm calling in from Los Angeles, California.
I love it. One of my favorite cities to go to. I'm in Toronto, and I'm just desperately waiting to come back out.
Yeah, well, I mean, LA is great. The weather's great. It's a little bit hazy out today, but the traffic, oh gosh, I can do about that.
So my favorite place to stay in LA is normally, we were talking a bit about berries. You can still see my sweater over here. We interviewed
right?
So my favorite spot is if you can picture Venice, and there's kind of the main Venice strip, and you go straight north on Rose, I think. There's a big Whole Foods. I always pick a place near there because it's like 30 minutes from the beach if I walk, and then like 30 minutes from the berries studio. But if I'm on a scooter, then it's like 10 minutes.
Awesome. No, I love Venice. Yeah. So our offices are based in it's in West LA, close to Santa Monica. So we're very close to Venice.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, I think we're going to get to how you got into LA in a bit, but I would really just love to start, as I was kind of researching and just reading about your personal origin story. It sounded like you grew up in Alabama, and I would love to just maybe start there. What was it like growing up there? And we'll slowly get our way to how you got to LA.
Yeah. So, my parents were immigrants, and my aunt had a restaurant in Alabama. Wow. So when we came here to America from Taiwan, and so naturally we ended up in Alabama. So growing up, I was the only Asian Chinese girl, but the only Asian girl in my school. And I just thought this was normal. I mean, had we landed in California or New York, it might be different, but was the only Asian girl. It was just very different. I'm sure for the people in my town, it was really different to have us there too. And, it was a great, but there was, obviously it was hard because my parents, they didn't assimilate into American culture. And we did, because I was 5 and my older brother was 7, my younger brother was 4, and we just naturally, but then as I got older, it was hard to identify, like, do I identify with my Chinese heritage, or do I identify with American culture, and I'm an American now? And I struggled with it for a very long time, because at home, we only spoke Mandarin to my mom and dad, my aunt, my grandmother, because they worked at a restaurant, so they didn't really have the opportunity to elevate their English. And so, but then at the same time, that's how we were able to preserve our Mandarin. And now I'm bilingual and I speak Mandarin, and I'm so thankful for that. And then, but then when I'm at school, I didn't want to be Asian because I didn't want to be different. I didn't want to stand out. And, of course, kids are going to make fun of us. We're different. And it's nothing compared to what's happening right now, which is really heartbreaking. When I think about like what I've gone through, it's like, okay, so I had some kids call us some racist names, or, make some comments, but it's we got over it, and we're kids. So, and there's just like a form of ignorance. I didn't know. But yeah, so that's how, so as I got older, I'm like, okay, I don't feel 100% Asian. I definitely don't feel 100% American. So I'm just Asian American. That's a third culture, right? And unless you are part of that, you don't understand what it's like. And there's nothing wrong. It's just, we have certain experiences that really define who we are. And we have certain experiences that you can kind of understand, I think they're like, you're Asian American, ... If you use like plastic bags, you recycle plastic bags as your trash bags. Like, I still do that. And so does
I have a whole bunch under my sink. I picked up from my mom.
Exactly. Yeah, and you're Asian if you keep your yogurt tins for Tupperware. My grandma, I got so much of them, I had to recycle them. So
Yeah, and it's my mom's Filipino, and it's even different countries, there's some kind of these common traits. Because like every maybe 6 months I would clean out my own cabin. This is just my own place, And I have a stack literally of this much of all the yogurt I've gone through of like, why do I still keep these? Like, it's just I have weird, like I wash it in my dishwasher and store it.
Yeah, exactly. And then eventually, you're a borderline hoarder, and that's how I am. Because my grandmother was, I don't like to throw anything out. I still am like that, but I got to, I have to be better.
We're trying. I mean, as a kind of an aside, I'm just curious, what's the story of how your aunt ended up in Alabama starting a restaurant? Because that is, I'm sure a whole story in itself. But
yeah, well, I think what happened was she just bought a business. She must have, when she came to America, she's like, what do I want to do? And as immigrants, this is something else that I think is hard for people. You're not really employable. So you are, because my parents came here. My mom was an accountant. My dad was in the Navy. So okay, that's great. They're pretty good jobs, right? And my mom was an accountant at a garment company, a fashion company. So she comes here, she doesn't speak English, she doesn't read or write. So, and my dad has to start over. So you are, in a sense, not employable because you don't have the language. My parents didn't go to college, so they naturally, and same with my aunt. So they must have said, okay, well, what can we do that doesn't require? So obviously, food is a huge part of our culture, and we love it, and that's the way you express love and family. And so, and there's all these great recipes. So my aunt bought a business, and then my mom and dad worked for my aunt, but they ended up opening their own restaurant in the town that I grew up in Alabama.
So that kind of already jumps to the other part I was wanting to dig into more was, I'm always very fascinated by when you end up starting a business later in life. What were those little ingredients that either did you try to start businesses, or were your parents entrepreneurial? It's my dad came here from Serbia, and it's a similar kind of immigrant experience of trying to find jobs or create jobs or whatever you can cobble together. And so obviously, since your parents were by not even by choice, but by necessity to become entrepreneurial, how did you get involved, if at all, in those early days of running the restaurant or doing other things to get by?
Oh yes, no, I mean, I worked at I've been working since I was 10. I helped my grandfather wash dishes at my aunt's restaurant, and then when I was 12, because I looked a little older, I was the hostess, and nobody questioned. They thought I was 16. So then I became a waitress. And then all throughout high school, I worked at my mom's restaurant. And so did my brothers, and so did a lot of our friends. And I was a waitress, I was a hostess so there wasn't a weekend where I didn't work. Unfortunately, we weren't really big into sports. Children now, my daughter's booked every weekend, but we worked at the restaurant a lot. Yeah. And so that was, and I think as insignificant as it seemed, it's actually really, really, really significant. And it's a stepping stone into your career because it taught me good work ethic. Like what I'm doing now, okay, what am I doing now? I'm creating beauty products. I want women to become confident. We focus a lot on customer service, making sure that customers are happy. So in a way, beauty is still hospitality. So I always greeted the customers and made sure everybody was happy with their meal. If they weren't, like, what can we do to resolve that, right? So all these things that you learn later in life, and it's not just in hospitality or beauty, it's every business. You have to make sure your customer is really happy. You're listening to your customers. And then, I love fashion and clothing when I was in high school. So I got jobs at like the Limited, the Gap, all these stores that those kids I probably don't even know about, but I the discounts.
Yeah.
So then I graduated high school. I went to Boston University, which is an eye opener because then all of a sudden I was surrounded by really amazing, diverse friends from all over, from all countries in Asia, South America, the Middle East, and American friends. And that was like, wow, it's amazing. And that's why, diversity is really important. And like being surrounded by diverse friends is really important. And that's how and then I worked at clothing stores in a nightclub in college.
Wow.
So I was fusing my fashion and hospitality. Yeah,
all the things. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you've been in I always call it service and sales your whole life, as most founders I know.
Yes.
Have some version of that. One thing that's another, and this is just pure happenstance, but another thing you share with at least the last other two people I interviewed. So on Friday, I interviewed the CEO of Barry's, and
Mhm.
he started his career as an actor in LA.
That's amazing.
And then before that, I interviewed a woman named Melanie Travis, who started a business called Andy Swim, and she started her career on the producing side of like creating short films and kind of on that side.
Awesome.
And so now you're 3 for 3, a third entrepreneur in the space that started your career in film. And so how, so you're at Boston University. How does I'm at Boston University turn into I'm going to become an actress, and then I'm going to be in Power Rangers?
I know. Oh my goodness. So I mean, I love these stories. Like you said, these unconventional paths. Like, oh, I didn't go to Harvard Business School. Like, I wasn't in finance. Like, I didn't have a track, right? And I didn't really kind of know what I wanted to do. All I know is like I love fashion, and then I worked at clothing stores all throughout. But I just realized like I actually love either giving women makeover or dressing them up. So, but what happened in college was I met this awesome woman. She was she was kind of like she was Asian, so she was kind of like my mom in Boston, but she's so awesome. She was actually my agent, and she sent me on a lot of these on a lot of local commercials, which I was able to, and I got them. And then obviously, and then I was going to New York a lot, and I was like, I think I want to be an actress. I didn't realize how hard it was going to be. And one, I really felt that Hollywood needed more Asian American actresses. Was I wrong? I mean, they are not ready to embrace like all of our uniqueness and really who we are, right? And we're not represented properly. And this was back, decades ago, right? Not like so many decades ago, but decades ago, it still hasn't changed much. Yeah. So and then I moved out here, and I was able to get like a Coca-Cola commercial, Motorola, and then Ford commercial like almost right away. And then I was able to get a really good agent right away. So they created these opportunities for me. But then and then I got a few pilots and never got picked up. And then I got called in for Power Rangers as a callback, and in the audition, it was for the evil villainess. I mean, I'll show you a quick picture because I think about, okay, this is the best I was able to do in acting. I got to get out. I got to get out because, so yeah, I was the evil villainess Vipera on Power Rangers, and this was my character here. Let's see. Right here. So my midriff was exposed. I had to wear a ton of heavy makeup, and it wrecked my skin. So I developed everything from psoriasis, adult acne, rosacea, and nothing was working. And that's when I rediscovered my grandmother's Asian beauty secrets. And this was over 10 years ago. And we started out in Henry Bendel, Fred Siegel, and then the economy crashed, and we had a really hard time. So Purelease is actually a fusion of like French skin technology, and that's why it doesn't sound Asian, but it's rooted in blue lotus and white tea, all these ingredients my grandmother used when I was growing up. And that's what actually led me into entrepreneurship. And I always knew, because towards the end of my acting, I wasn't getting the roles that I wanted. There was a lot of waiting around. Truthfully, I couldn't take it. It actually was so distressful to me to not know what's next. And I didn't have a lot of control over it. And that was another reason, a huge part of why I knew I had to get out, because I didn't have control over my next job or what was happening next. I think a lot of entrepreneurs, they want to know what's next. We want to know what's next. We want to know where we're going. And with acting, I was like, this is crazy.
You're like on a never-ending roadshow, like a funding roadshow, except you're pitching yourself. Exactly. You're the product. So I definitely want to obviously get to the Purelease story and how it was inspired by your a lot of the recipes or kind of formulas that your grandmother taught you. But I first want to just jump. We talked about, okay, you just started doing commercials, I guess back in Boston. How did you get the first one? Like that seemed like, I maybe I'm very naive in my head of like, I'm sure lots of people would think like, oh yeah, like maybe I could do commercials, but you actually you really book commercials having not done acting school or not done any of that. Like how did that first one, what was the first one and how did you get it?
Oh, well, the first one, I'm trying to think back. The first one was just like showing up. Right. And I think Boston was a lot. And also I was like a spokesmodel for Nokia. So, and I'm thinking back, it was like Nokia Asia. It was just, I think Boston was smaller, and I was probably at the right place at the right time, and there wasn't a lot of people. And then for the commercials, like I just like made sure I smiled a lot, and
Yeah.
was passionate about the product. But then all the things that I got, there was also like hundreds of things I didn't get too.
Yeah.
But for Power Rangers, I think the way I got it, was I didn't originally get the part. It was another woman that got the part, and she shot two episodes, and it was in the can, was edited. But then I think there was a falling out. Because it's a kids show, she wasn't very nice to kids. I think her personality completely changed after she got it and shot a couple of episodes. But I guess the producer was like, "We're not having this. We're can you?" So they asked her, but she was also like 3 inches shorter than me. She was also thinner than me, so I had to fit into her pants for this audition. I could barely find. I like sucked in my stomach, and I just zipped it up. Like, if you want, just all you have to do is 15 minutes. And then they were just kidding, like, "Hey, well, can you do a kick?" I go, "In fact, I can do a kick." Because my ex-boyfriend in college was a martial artist, and he taught me some moves. So I showed him my my side kick. It's like the only kick I know how to do. And then I think
there you go.
In these tight, pleather pants, and I was surprised I didn't rip them. And then and I think that's how I got it. I think that made me stand out. So for all the reasons why, I think that I always tell my daughter, and also just people in general, for all the ways I didn't want to stand out. And when I was younger, because of my heritage, I wanted to blend in. It's like, for all, and you have to do things to stand out. I mean, everything, business, your personality, like what's your uniqueness, in acting, like how did I have to stand out, So I think that's also another philosophy that it's like a really strong reversal from where I was when I was younger into where I am now, like wanting to mute down my heritage to now wanting to be so proud of it and showcasing it through the ingredients. And also I'll talk about my second brand, Yensa, later. Yeah.
That's one last question on this, and then we'll jump to this. I'm also, it sounds like and you can correct me if I'm wrong in terms of the timeline, but it looked like Power Rangers was the first kind of recurring show versus the other one sounded like were commercials or smaller things.
Yes.
What was the first day, or what was that first day like on set for you? Because I imagine it's very different to what you're used to.
I remember vividly, because first the booths were way too tight and they didn't have time to order me. And then the pants were way too tight. So I still wear the same pants, but this time it was like for 10 hours.
Oh my God.
And then the boots were really tight. So they didn't, it was being delivered, but it wouldn't arrive in time. And the first day, I just remember, there was like 80 people on set. It takes a production. I was so shocked. And then I just always remember, I did a lot of, "Oh my God, was that okay? Is that okay?" To the director, they're like, "Okay, just keep going." "Was that okay? Is that okay? Did I do that okay?" And they're just like, "Oh my God, we got an amateur on our hands." And so that was the first day. But then throughout the season, I was able to block everybody out. And I think that is also another skill you kind of have to do when you become an entrepreneur. You have to be like really laser focused. Like sometimes like you're not focused. Sometimes you have to be. And I just was able to block out like 50 to 80 people on the set and just like deliver my lines and like do it with confidence. And, towards the end, I was one take Jen. I was able to do it in one take.
I love it.
That was towards the end.
Yeah, well, it's after practice, deliver practice, day in and day out. So, there's, this is where kind of the threads start tying together. Your personal experience now being an actress for many years, your skin is obviously suffering, and that kind of makes you look at, what else? I'm sure what else can you do to fix that? And so, when did you first, like, in terms of the prototype for Purelease, like, what was the first version of that you produced, whether it's for yourself or like, how did that come about?
Oh yeah. So there was, I'm like, what are the essentials that I need for healthy skin? I was always wearing makeup. So a really good cleanser. So our Blue Lotus cleansing milk was probably our number one product, because and also it was also an eye remover too. So I was trying to be multitasking at the same time, because I just remember always going off set, I had so much makeup on. I had to use an eye makeup remover and then a cleanser. And so having multitasking products was huge. And then also having a really great SPF was really big, because for me, what happened was back in the day, I would look ashy because I would have the sunscreen would leave a really ashy mark. I mean, even though but I have yellow undertones, right? And so they would take a Polaroid of me. Sometimes that's how they did it. And then I would look at myself like, oh my God, like I look gray. Well, what is going on? So what was happening was my sunscreen wasn't blending into my skin. So it was altering the color and the shade of my foundation.
Just like sitting on top versus.
Exactly. Instead of blending in my skin tone. So I knew that when we were developing our moisturizer with SPF 30, and also I was mixing SPF with moisturizer. So I'm like, okay, let's have a moisturizer with SPF 30 built in that will look good under all skin tone, which will look good on all skin tones, but under any sort of color foundation. So that was some of the ideas. And then also because I had to wear concealer a lot, my makeup artist would always put eye cream under my eyes just to keep it like set it. But the problem is it would peel off my eyes. So when we're developing an eye serum, Blue Lotus eye serum, I'm like, hey, this needs to hydrate, but it cannot peel. Peeling off when you're putting on concealer.
Yeah. So there's obviously, now we're getting to just like so many different products, but let's say with the cleanser as an example, at some point, obviously you find a manufacturer and you produce it and you agree on the formula. At any point, did you kind of like mix this at home? I was reading through the origin story of like how you use Blue Lotus and with teas and different things like that. What was the version 0.001?
Oh, yes.
How did what did that who did you talk to? Did you make it in your kitchen?
Oh, yeah.
Like how did that come about?
So my grandmother so Blue Lotus cleansing milk is actually infused with soy milk. And so my grandmother would actually wash her face with soy milk. Because she was like, oh, it's going to leave my skin with a pearl-like appearance, supple. So I knew I wanted to infuse that. And then when I would get skin irritations, I would actually put white tea or green tea on my skin, because it has really awesome anti-inflammatory properties. And so that's when I started. And I didn't actually make the cleanser at home, but I knew all these ingredients. So actually, we went to a really talented chemist. Unfortunately, he's passed away, but he understood like what I was doing. He knew, and I told him I knew the only thing that set me apart was my heritage, and I couldn't, because you can go to a lab and take their stock formulas, but they're really not going to be unique, and other people are going to have them. So we custom formulate all of our own products. We don't take anything that's stock, and we didn't back then, and we still don't now. But and then my chemist at the time, he was Turkish French, so he studied in Europe, and at the time, European skin innovation was where all of the breakthrough was happening, and now it's Korea. Yeah. So I had really, really amazing formulas, and they were the original 7 that he created, and we still have them, and they're some of our Purelease's bestsellers.
That's it's also very important, IP in terms of it's not something off the shelf, but it's based on some true intimate knowledge from your heritage, which I think is very special.
Exactly.
So obviously you get to the point where, so can a place be in your life when you were first launching Purelease? Like it sounded like you'd stopped acting at this point, or like what was, around 2007, 2008, what was going on in your life, and, what made you decide like, I'm going to actually turn this into a business?
What happened was, so when I was developing, because I didn't know what I was doing, I was going to every single beauty show, packaging show, and a lot of them took place in New York. And then I was working with a really awesome consultant. He was from the East Coast, and just giving me good advice. Like they didn't, I didn't have a huge budget, so everybody was just giving me advice, guiding me, just from their own goodwill. But I would travel to New York a lot, and every time I go to New York, guess what? My agent called me, you have an audition. It was so stressful, because if you miss too many, like your agents are going to get annoyed with you. And then if I'm always calling them to call book out, they're like, okay, you're not taking it serious. So I would always like, okay, well, let me just go in hopes that they don't. But every time without fail, I would be in LA for weeks, and now I get no calls. And the second I get on a plane or I land, they're like, where are you? Where have you been trying to call you? I'm like, this is just too stressful. I can't do this.
Yeah.
then I was just like, I'm just gonna focus on this. I'm so glad I did. And so during that time, it was a lot of traveling. I wasn't making any money, right? It was just sort of like getting by. You're just doing a lot of R&D. And at the time, there was no such thing as like angel investor. I mean, entrepreneurs are so lucky now. You got LinkedIn. You can find people. Back then, it was just like trying to ask around people you know. So it was a lot of learning, a lot of failures, a lot of mistakes, and then just a lot of, had I known how hard it was back then, and maybe I wouldn't. I mean, life is supposed to only make, like Steve Jobs says, only makes sense going backwards. Had I known how hard it was back then, I probably wouldn't have started. But now I'm so glad I did, because now it's entrepreneurship is just, look, it's so easy. The barriers to entry has been broken down, but it's so much harder to be successful now.
And so, tactically, how did you pay for that first order, or like the initial startup cost, given that you're not working? I'm sure you saved some money, but
I saved some money, and then my uncle loaned me $150,000, which I had to pay back years and years and years later with interest. My chemist at the time, because he was already ready to retire, but he was doing it as a hobby. He's like, okay, I'm going to do this for you. You can just pay me over time. So I was able to pay him back like 3 years later. But my biggest mistake, and I would never, ever, ever advise this. I had a condo that I bought early on, so it gained a lot of equity, and I took equity out of my condo, which you should never do. And I'll tell you why. I was in my situation. Okay. Yeah. I was first-time entrepreneur with this beauty concept that was unproven. I didn't have a solid business. Okay. It's not like I was taking equity to fund a purchase order. Okay. And you're taking debt on top of risk. Okay. Yeah. So guess what? I lost my condo. It went into foreclosure. Okay. Wow. So that's business. So I have had failures, and that was one of them. So I lost my condo. And so I never, ever advise that unless, like right now, okay, if I let's say if I had the condo, I'm like, okay, well, I need to pull out like $100,000 because I'm funding this purchase order. But I know I've worked with this company forever. Like that's different. That's a different kind of risk. You already have built a foundation. You already have a business. But when you're just starting out, I mean, I remember one of my advisors who was really, really wise. I was only 27 at the time. And he's like, God, I just really, really, when I was developing, that's really risky, John. I don't think you should do it. And my condo was going to foreclosure, and I was getting calls from the banks like every day on the weekends. I just remember that. I'm like, why did I listen to you? So yeah. But knowing now what I know, and knowing a lot more entrepreneurs, like my story is not that much different. There's a lot of entrepreneurs that was willing to just put everything on the line because they believe in themselves, and they ended up succeeding big. So there's
a certain survivor bias to it. Like there's many, not many, there's probably some stories of where like, I put my house on the line and it worked great. And then there's lots of stories and untold stories of the same thing that you had lived through.
Yes.
And I'd love to pause at this moment though, of like, what happened the next day after your condo foreclosed? So, the bank takes possession of it. Like, what did you do that next day once you no longer had it?
I was able, it was during this time, because like during you're able to like live in there for a while. So I was able to like just really, really grind and like work on my business. And by the time it did, I was able to rent a place, rent an apartment.
Yeah.
And that's kind of in a really small apartment. And I was able to just like work through it. I mean, I've since like bought another home, and it's like no risk there. It's super tight. It was hard to get a mortgage now. I had to really qualify. And so, that's what happened. I used that time to really buckle down. And I can tell you how I did it. What happened was when the economy crashed, we basically, we're at Henry Bendel, Fred Siegel, and a lot of those stores, Beauty and Maine, they're not around anymore. So JD's Cosmetics, and they're not around anymore. So I realized that I can't do the same thing over and over and expect a different. I can't just keep on trying to go into stores. So I this was the rise of social media.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, Facebook business pages, Twitter, and then came Instagram and YouTube. And I said, we have to go direct to consumer. I mean, it just makes business sense, right? And so then this is the rise of Ipsy, now a major powerhouse. And I love them because we started partnering very early on, 2012, and when nobody really understood their business. And nobody was willing to take a risk on us. And they just, even after the recession, retailers wanted to know, like, what was your are you going to advertise on Allure, Cosmo, Glamour, all these, and are you going to be able to support training? That was how they were creating the awareness. And you had this new, like a new establishment that was on the rise. Now people was like, it makes sense, right? It's been around like social media, Ipsy subscription, beauty boxes, Facet Fun. And then we started partnering with Ipsy, Facet Fun, and Birchbox, but to a much smaller extent. But Ipsy was clearly the #1 winner. And then there's BoxyCharm, because they utilized YouTubers at the time, which had huge followings, and they were under the radar, and they understood, Marcelo, the CEO, understood the power of influencers and what they can do. And so we partnered with them, and that's what actually, and we started sending out, our very first one was like 25,000 units. Okay, that is a lot. Back for me. Barely even sell 5 products. Right. So to get 25,000 samples out in 1 month, it was huge. And now we're doing, you know, 500,000. But that's a very impactful way to bypass a lot of the club. It takes you 6 months to get in the store. Like, no, here, let's produce these samples. Let's put them back. Let's get them out to the right people. And that's how we were able to rebuild Purelease into a digitally native brand. And now we're on Amazon and a few other stores, but we were able to create that awareness without brick and mortar because of platforms like Ipsy.
They are the new essentially retail channel back then, where and it just changed the game, because I used to, like, I think when we were on that call with Marcelo, so myself and Ray had run a beauty subscription box company out of Toronto, did not have the right business model at all. Ipsy was really the right model. But what we learned is when you're trying to go into any of these stores, you have your co-op marketing dollars and this and that, and what's your marketing support? And like, I don't care about Facebook, like what you're saying, like, what are you doing in these magazines? And like, none of that stuff is actually driving sales. Like,
no, people take it, they throw it away, and then that's gone. But at least it lives, you know, on platforms. On YouTube, on Instagram, and the website, you know.
That was my favorite one, because we used to try to do some deals with magazines, and you would see their media kits or whatever, and they would give you this, like, well, this one magazine is read by on average of 7 people. And I'm like, okay, but like, are 6 of them like the person who has like a cold in the doctor's office and is reading a magazine from 3 years ago? I guess I'll buy that.
Getting their manicure, pedicures, exactly.
So anyway.
Exactly. And out of this platform, particularly Ipsy, they were able to create beauty editors as a result, influencers, but you know, they are essentially beauty editors because they become experts, and they're even doing more. They're showing you how to apply it. They're talking about it in real, you know, live with their voices, not just writing, you know, in print. So it really changed everything. And you know, and that is like a pivotal moment. You know, sometimes businesses, you have to make choices and you have to embrace like newness and novelty. And that was a right choice for us. It actually, we wouldn't have survived otherwise.
Yeah, but I love that story too, because it was early days of Marcelo's company, and it's very synergistic. Like, you know, Marcelo is needing entrepreneurs like you to believe in his model, and you need an entrepreneur like him to give you that distribution channel.
But what happened was, at the time, I mean, this is crazily, but brands wouldn't give them products. They were like, YouTube, we don't believe in YouTube. I mean, it's crazy. And he was having a hard time. And he said, you know, if you didn't give us the products, we would have been dead. I'm like, well, I had a warehouse full price and no stores wanted that. Please take it. You know, so it was definitely a marriage of like, we really needed it. And then just like believing in it, and I'm so thankful for that, because I mean, it really it is a historical moment in our business, you know, of that, like, working, you know, because I was trying so hard, and I really came a hair away from turning off the lights.
That's crazy. And
Yeah.
and again, jumping a bit into tactics. So you kind of shared in that early 2008, it was your house, it's your uncle, it's this great payment term from your chemist. For the second wave around 2011, 2012, how did you finance like that 25,000 order from Marcelo? How did you think about?
Well, I had products in my warehouse.
Oh, so you produced this all, and it was
all produced. It was all produced, and like nobody would take it. And then what happened was, he had somebody kind of help him like curate products because they weren't from the beauty industry. I mean, it's crazy how they were such disruptors because they didn't know the beauty industry, and sometimes that's good because had they known, and some wise beauty industry veteran be like, well, we can get samples at Bloomingdale's and Saks and so forth. It's like, okay, but there's a whole pipeline of indie brands that are really cool that you can't discover. And so what happened was, and I knew this guy named Dan. He was awesome. He was helping. He goes, well, I know you really need the money, so why don't I send you a check? I go, no. I'm going to come tomorrow. I'm going to deliver the products, and I'm going to come pick up that check. I literally had like $40 in my account. And so, my daughter's dad and I at the time, we went and rented a van. We went to our warehouse, a storage space. Okay. Not even a warehouse, a storage space, a public storage space.
Yeah.
We got all these products and we delivered it. And then we sent it out. And then we drove and we got the check. And literally that was a turning point.
That's amazing.
As small as it seems today, but it was so important and significant then.
Yeah.
And now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's not to trivialize it, but it's really, there's a lot of hard work and struggle that often goes into what looks like good luck. And so from the external perspective, like, oh, that's a lucky break, but it's like, oh, there's all this stuff that happened to just lead for you to even be able to take advantage of that. Moment.
I can give you some more background because story on that. So what happened was during that summer, I had gone to San Francisco, New York, and I was begging investors to invest. I probably met over 100 investors, and that investor would be like, okay, like I feel bad, or my friend, let me introduce you to 2 more. Those 2 more people will introduce me to 2 more people, and I was just going around like with like a chicken with my head cut off with no direction, and nobody would invest. And that meeting that actually put Ipsy and I together was the very last meeting. I had traveled to New York all summer, couch surfed on my friends' places with 1 suitcase, on points. Okay. And then went to San Francisco, stayed at my friend's place, tried to meet all these investors with no luck. And I came back to LA literally really, really broken. And it was a very, very, very last meeting that I took. That actually connected with Ipsy. And had I just been like, and I did say to myself, well, and I did have this feeling, defeatist attitude, well, God, this is probably not going to work out.
Yeah.
But I'm just going to do it anyway because I know Dan. I went there and I was basically saying to Dan, can you invest in Purelease? He's like, no, I can't. He's like, but I'm working this company, and Michelle Phan at the time she was curating the bags. And so that was serendipitous. And I think my point of why I'm telling the story is like, sometimes you just can't leave a stone unturned. When you're trying to break through and you're in a bind, like I didn't want to take all this meeting. It was exhausting. It led me nowhere. But at the same time, I had to do it because what if was like my thought, what if? And literally my very, very, very last meeting is what connected. Made things work and brought me to where I am today.
That's amazing. Well, you sung the praise, I'm sure, to Marcelo, and so thank you on behalf of everyone else that you invested in, and I'm sure it's in reverse too. Marcelo's very thankful that you came around to.
Oh my God, no. Ipsy and I are like life partners for sure. The entire Ipsy team, they're awesome.
That's awesome. So after that, the business continues to gain traction, and take us to, before we get into Yensa, what were some of the tactics you used along the way to continue to grow the business, and in terms of channels, in terms of funding, like what does that path look like from 2012 till
till now.
2018.
So
Yeah,
we
till now.
continue to go direct, right? And
Mhm.
so we continue to really go deep and wide into sampling because that's how we get our products out. And then we started partnering with more like BoxyCharm, which they have a different audience. And then also Fat Fit Fun, which is more of a fitness lifestyle. So we started doing that. And then we actually were a believer on Amazon. So we were one of the first brands to go on Amazon too. So we're on Amazon, but to leverage all the reviews and all of that has been really, really helpful, and just all the awareness.
Mhm.
Build new products, and Ipsy is really great with giving us feedback. With their feedback loop is awesome. Like, what products can we suggest to you that we know can ensure success with our subscribers? So we
Mhm.
do a lot of that as well.
And there's a few brands that have used that. Like I know Native, the deodorant brand, has used their reviews, and they were actually very scientific about it. They subtly tweak their formulas. Like, let's say you bought the, I don't know, make up a scent like the Mountain Fresh scent. They would actually in the background tweak the formula behind each, so that like they know you got Mountain Fresh A and then I got Mountain Fresh B, and they'll look at our reviews to develop the product. And I think Elf
That's
Cosmetics did that
awesome.
too. Yeah.
That's really, really smart. Maybe we should start implementing that too.
Yeah, it's kind of the, you can't push the line too far because I'm like, maybe I like I can't, you can't give me another scent. It has to be within the category, but it was like little subtle ingredient tweaks which I found fascinating.
Exactly.
So obviously you go through a lot of hard work to get the business to where it is today. Why start a second brand?
Well, that's a great question, and I'm so glad I did. But I'll tell you, the inspiration behind Yensa is so after giving birth to my daughter, my mother was taking care of me, and she followed. So she wanted to take care of me. She followed this tradition called 坐月子, which means sit out the month, and is rooted in 2,000-year-old Chinese medicine. Okay, so where the new mother, she sits out for 1 month, does nothing, and she rests her body, and she eats superfoods. So my mother was feeding me black rice instead of white rice or brown rice, black tea, black sesame, black seaweed. Okay, and then also, this sounds crazy, but she was making me chicken soup out of black chicken. I know that sounds crazy, but it tastes the same, but it just has so much more nutrition. And this is a tradition that is an Asian that's been utilized and handed down from generation to generation. This is how they take care of new mothers, because your body is going through a lot. You've lost a lot of energy, and you're hormonal. And so my mother was following this. And then, so, I was sitting there, and I was, I'm 10 years older now, and my skin is wrecked again. I'm feeling exhausted. And then, but when I was eating these superfoods, not only did they taste good, but it made me feel energetic again. And I started, my hair and my skin was just starting to like have life again. I was like, wow, I would love to take these superfood concepts and infuse it into complexion cosmetics. Okay, at this point, I started developing a little bit more sunspots, and who doesn't? We all love to be outside. So I needed more coverage in my product. So I wanted to take a superfood skincare science concept and infuse into complexion cosmetics. And so that's what Yensa is. It's a superfood cosmetic, and Yensa is actually derived from my last name. My last name is Yen. It means color and face in Chinese. And Yensa just means color. And if you look at our icon, so each product has 8 superfoods. Our icon has 8 number 8s wrapped up.
Oh, very cool.
In infinity loop. And it stands and represents, it's the luckiest number in Chinese culture, in Asian culture, but also represents great health, prosperity, and infinite possibilities. So I wanted to actually go really, really deep into our culture, because I'm proud. Like Purelease, okay, I was doing it, but it was almost okay, but it's fused with like Western and European. But I wanted to go really, really deep into our heritage. We try to launch products on the 8th of every month. It doesn't always happen that way. And then, so because of all my mistakes I made with Purelease, I knew, okay, I'm launching Yensa with Ipsy, because I knew I could get out thousands of samples in 1 month. I can get reviews, I can get feedback fast, and I can roll out other products. So our second platform, so we're digital direct to consumer for 1.5 years, and our second platform that we were targeting was QVC. So now we're on QVC. QVC Why? Because QVC is a strong storytelling platform. It's the only place I was able to build awareness and understanding what is Yensa, what is superfoods, and why is it so great for your skin. And so now Yensa can come alive on QVC, and then we have the direct to consumer with Ipsy, just people touching our products, loving it, talking about it, sharing it. And then we're about to launch in Nordstrom's by the end of the month, and we're talking to other retailers. So I went the other direction. Instead of going from retail trying to go e-commerce, I went direct to consumer, then in TV, and then retail.
Yeah. Well, I think then that you bring another, I guess, point of leverage to a Nordstrom or someone else of like, yeah, like I have this distribution channel of the brand where like you want me in the store versus I have to convince you that you need to stock me.
It is so much easier doing it this way because you have a lot more assets to show.
Yeah. One tactical piece, and I'm curious if you've tried it or not. Someone else I'd interviewed, and actually my co-founder from my last company, she's now their COO. It's a jewelry brand called Jennybird. And what they've been experimenting with is basically running their own QVC, like directly, meaning like just like we're talking right now on a live stream. They and I'll find the name of the software, but they live stream to their customers. It's like a shoppable live stream. So you could run this.
Yeah, no, there's all these great ways. And I think if you can talk directly to the customer is the best, because you're building trust, and they're hearing your story. That's great. That's awesome. No, I think there's so many new ways to explore and get your product out there.
Yeah. How does it feel to be on QVC now? It's almost like a blast from the past from your acting days.
Yes, okay, again, back to every job you do in your childhood, when you're a young adult, it brings you back to where you are. Yes. So I'm back on air.
Yeah.
I'm back on TV.
And so you're doing the QVC from where you're sitting right now.
Exactly. Our very last show was right there.
And so how does that, I mean, this is again, kind of a digression, because I did a tour of both HSN and QVC, because my last company, we had tried to do, we had done distribution deals with them for sampling programs. And they walked me through the whole setup of like, here's how the stages are. Here's the person talking into your ear and cueing you. And there's the movie people can watch. I think it was Joy that also talked about that. What's it like when you're selling on QVC from your laptop in your office? Right? Like, how do they talk to you? How does that all work?
Well, yeah. So I do have an earpiece. And what happens is before you go on, the producer calls you. And they're like, okay, Jen, are you set up? And they're like, okay, move to the right a little bit, move to the left. But what happens, the way you see yourself on screen is different than when they cut it in half. Like right now, I was like, I'm like, okay, this. And then I didn't get our lighting right a little bit. And then it's just like such a learning curve. I don't like it as much, but it's way more efficient, effective than
to fly down to
Philly, right?
Yeah.
And then they I had some problems with the earpiece. But it was only for 30 seconds, thank God, and you can hear everyone. But then it smoothed out, and luckily we had a great show. I'm thankful for that. So I think that QVC they figure out a way to quickly adapt, because they weren't allowing guests in the studio, and I think that they have definitely thrived.
Yeah. Well, I can imagine for many, the demand certainly just, they benefit from e-commerce like no one else, and their selling is entertaining. Yes. More than other things, as it always has been, right?
Entertaining and education. Exactly.
Yeah. I can't remember which one it was that told me this, but I remember one of them that I had toured which doesn't surprise me. They figured it out. They actually had like a backup site somewhere in Tennessee or in Texas from wherever the base studio was, to the point where, let's say something happened in the studio in Philly or the one in Florida for HSN, just something happened and it shut down. They could essentially flip a switch and turn on a whole new studio.
Oh my God.
Immediately.
That's amazing.
Yeah, because for them, like every minute of downtime is lost revenue. That's like shelf space.
Right. That's every second. Exactly. And, and I think that it goes to show you that they're the originators of direct to consumer. Right now, we see YouTube, we see Instagram, and live, and where people can ask you questions. It just goes to show you like how important it is to have direct conversations with your customers.
Yeah.
before we shut down, I went to every single Ipsy trade show. It was called Ips Beauty, Generation Beauty, but then they changed it to Destination, Ipsy Destination. I was at every single show selling like everybody else. And I loved it because I got to hear honest feedback, and they didn't know who I was. I just said, hey, have you heard of Purelisse? Have you heard of Yensa? I'd love for you to try this shade. I think this is perfect for you. Let me know what you think. Or they're like, oh, have you heard of us? Oh, I'm not sure. I think I have. And you know what? What I realized too is not a lot of people have heard about us. So it was good for me to be there and introduce them to the products, and it's fun. And it just showed I think that building the trust with your customers is really important.
Yeah.
And I think that QVC was, you can just tell it's proven. It's worked for them. And now it's transitioning to more digital.
Yeah. Well, I'm very fascinated by that too, because everyone used to make fun of all the weird products you'd see on late night infomercials, but that is like direct response TV. That was the way you bought stuff online. Is that you see this number, you call the number, and you buy it. And it just happened to be the weird tchotchke products back in the day. And then before that, we had catalogs. Like the Sears catalog was the V1, and Sears was the king. Like Sears. Sears should have been Amazon.
I know. You're right. And same with Kmart or Walmart too. I mean, you're just, yes. It's why you can never, ever, you always have to be reinventing. You always have to be on the edge. Like, just, it's great to be in the middle of all this innovation. Like my biggest fear is always, oh my God, what if I stop, understanding change and like embracing it? Because it will. I mean, maybe eventually one day it will happen to us. Like, I hope that it doesn't. But when you see that, you're like, God, I can never let that happen.
100%.
But change is happening so fast.
Well, I think the last point, and we'll finish off on one more question. To kind of tie together all these conversations, I love seeing these patterns, right? The interviewing Joey, who's the CEO of Barry's. He, in his own ways, like you, have always in front of customers. He, at least when studios were still open, and now on lives, he still continues to teach classes. He's like a CEO of like a nearly $1 billion company, right?
Yes, that's amazing. That's incredible.
Yeah, and most people, and I think this is great, and I'm sure it's the same way with you. And until you say something to them, like no one knows he's the CEO, because like only the weird business people like me are like, I want to know who the CEO is. But it's like, oh, this is just Joey, some trainer, and hear people talk, whatever. It's like, I like that class. I hated that class. Who's this Joey guy? I love and he gets like real raw feedback without having to do a poll or like email people.
And truthfully, when I think about it, it's like, I'm just like you, like meaning like, I love beauty products, and I just want to share it with you, like there's not a huge difference. So that's when I'm in that scenario, I don't need them to know. I'm just beauty enthusiast, product junkie, beauty lover, just like you. And so that's exactly, I think if you're passionate about it, you don't mind selling it, you don't mind sharing it, and
it's natural. It's not even selling. It's just like, I love it, so I will just tell you why I love it, and if you agree, you're gonna buy it. If you don't, that's okay. I'll tell the next person.
That's right.
I want to be mindful of your schedule. So the last thing I'd love to finish off on, it's pretty clear to me that you're, obviously very excited to grow Purelease and Yensa, and I'm sure there's many more businesses you have in your head. Personally, what else are you excited about for the rest of the year? Whether it's yourself, your family, like what else are you excited to do next, to learn, whatever it is?
Well, I'm excited that there's light for the world to open up again, where people can connect in person and travel again. I think that a lot of people, are ready to like see more parts of the world, and I'm excited for that. One, two, personally, for my daughter to go back to school. I know how hard it is on young kids and families and parents. So I'm excited for that. And then, I think that's what I can, for the end of the year, I just hope that things can go back to normal. And that's what I'm excited about.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, Jennifer, thank you so much for taking the time. This was super fun, and I look forward to seeing what you launch next. I'm very confident there'll be something new very soon.
Thank you. Thank you guys for joining.
Awesome. Thank you.
Take care. Stay healthy.
Yeah, you too.